He's kind of used to the ups and downs of exit interviews. It's not going to be something that's abnormal at this stage in his career.
So I kind of took that attitude with me when I came into the NBA, and that did not serve me very well.
The best Kareem Abdul-Jabbar versus racist Showboat. Story ever told. 1983. A Lakers practice. Mitch Kupchak thought he could push the legend. He was wrong. The skyhook was legendary, calm, and unstoppable. But there was another side to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a darker side. A martial artist trained by Bruce Lee, a man who had spent his entire life enduring racism and disrespect. This is the story of the day the captain snapped. The day he silenced the racist Showboat with one devastating strike. The day practice ended with a body on the floor. The 1980s Lakers were magic. Fast breaks, high fives, championships. Magic Johnson smiled for the cameras. The team looked like brothers, but that was the surface. Underneath was tension. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar stood apart from the party atmosphere. While teammates lived together in the Fox Hills apartments like a frat house, Kareem was somewhere else mentally. He was older. He carried different scars. He had boycotted the 1968 Olympics. He had converted to Islam when America hated Muslims. He had befriended Bruce Lee and learned to fight. He was a black intellectual in a world that wanted him to just shut up and dribble. Kareem operated on a different frequency. While teammates discussed cars and clubs, he read historical biographies and listened to jazz. Mitch Kupchak himself later admitted the disconnect. He said Kareem would walk into the training room and quote lines from books he had read. Most guys had zero idea what he was talking about. This intellectual distance was often seen as arrogance by white teammates. It built resentment that would eventually explode on the practice court. The media called Kareem surly and distant. They said he was arrogant, but this was a fundamental misunderstanding. Kareem was not arrogant. He was protecting himself. He had built an intellectual fortress to survive in a league that did not respect his mind. He viewed the basketball court as a place of business and dignity, not a playground, not a place for fooling around, especially when that fooling around carried the subtext of racial disrespect. Mitch Kupchak was different. He came from North Carolina with a championship pedigree from his time with the Washington Bullets, but by 1983 his knees were shot. A severe injury had robbed him of his athleticism. He wore a brace. He could barely jump. To keep his roster spot, he had to be valuable in other ways. He became the enforcer, the practice player who pushed the stars, the guy who talked trash and played physical. The coaches loved it. They thought it toughened Kareem up for the playoffs. What do you think about players like Kupchak who talk trash to stay relevant? Drop a comment below. Kupchak was loud. He was performative. He celebrated defensive stops against Kareem like he had just won a championship. He was showboating his toughness, playing to the coaches, playing to his teammates. He was the white guy who wasn't afraid of the black superstar. That role had economic value. The more he irritated Kareem, the more the coaches noticed him. It was a dangerous game. In the brutal economy of the 80s NBA, a player who could no longer jump had to find other ways to prove his worth. Kupchak chose intimidation. There is a specific type of white showboating in sports. It involves the performative domination of black bodies, the hard foul celebrated as hustle, the trash talk designed to get in the head of a superior athlete. Kupchak was leaning into this archetype. He was the great white hope of the practice squad, the guy who would not back down from the giant Muslim intellectual. This was his value proposition to the coaching staff. The relationship between Kareem and his white teammates was complicated. Kareem had explicitly stated that black players communicated differently than white players. He said the lines of communication between blacks were more instant. A white player was slow to pick up on the signals. This cultural blind spot would prove fatal for Kupchak. He could not read the warning signs that every black player on that court understood immediately. Kareem was not new to violence. In 1977, rookie Kent Benson elbowed him in the stomach during a game. Kareem turned around and threw a punch that shattered Benson's jaw. Kareem also broke his own hand. He missed 20 games. The league barely punished him. They understood. You push a giant, the giant pushes back. But Kareem learned a lesson. Punching with a closed fist was expensive. It cost him games and money. He needed a better weapon, something that would hurt his opponent but protect his hand. By 1983, he had figured it out. The Benson incident established what insiders called the Abdul-Jabbar rules. First, the referees would not protect Kareem. The league allowed physical abuse of giants because their size was seen as unfair. Second, Kareem was the law. If abuse crossed a threshold, he would act as judge, jury, and executioner. Third, there was a cost. Opponents accepted they might get hit, but they also knew Kareem risked breaking his hand. By 1983, Kareem had evolved past this limitation. His martial arts training under Bruce Lee had taught him economy of motion and devastating force application. He knew the biomechanics of the human body. He knew how to break a hand, shatter a jaw, and collapse a windpipe. Bruce Lee's philosophy of Jeet Kune Do emphasized three principles: economy of motion, emotional control, and the devastating application of force when necessary. Kareem absorbed all three. Unlike the brawlers of the NBA who threw wild haymakers, Kareem understood precision. His passivity was not weakness. It was the discipline of a man who knew exactly what he was capable of doing. He was a dormant weapon waiting for the right moment. Practice that day was typical. Pat Riley, architect of the suffer to win philosophy, had the team scrimmaging hard, full contact. The air was heavy with humidity and testosterone. Kupchak was assigned to guard Kareem. This was his Super Bowl. He leaned his weight on Kareem's back. He grabbed his jersey. He denied entry passes. This was acceptable. This was basketball. But then Kupchak crossed the line. The tension had been building for weeks. Kupchak had been mocking Kareem's age. He questioned his leadership in film sessions. He talked over him. Veterans on the team later admitted Kupchak was acting bigger than he actually was. The irritation grew into tension. The tension grew into inevitability. Everyone could feel something was coming. They just didn't know when or how bad it would be. Then came the trigger moment. Kupchak made a racist remark. The exact words have been scrubbed from history, but the context suggests something that stripped Kareem of his dignity, likely the word boy, or a comment about his religion. Something that said, "You are beneath me." Kupchak accompanied the slur with showboating, laughing, celebrating, playing to the crowd. He was humiliating the captain. He was declaring superiority. The entire gym froze. This was not trash talk anymore. This was racism. Kareem stopped playing. He turned to Kupchak. He did not yell. He did not posture. He spoke calmly. "Don't do that again." This was the warning. In black communication, this is a final offer of mercy. This is the moment where the contract of peace is about to expire. But Mitch Kupchak did not understand. He saw calmness as weakness. He saw an old man who didn't want to fight. He smiled. He talked back. He engaged again, physical and loud. He poked the bear. The strike was instantaneous. As play resumed and Kupchak initiated contact, Kareem pivoted. He did not throw a punch. He threw an elbow. But this was not a basketball elbow. This was martial arts. Kareem drove the point of his elbow directly into Mitch Kupchak's larynx. The target was chosen with surgical precision. The throat. The mechanics were perfect. The elbow is the hardest bone in the upper body. The throat is soft cartilage. The force transfer was immediate and devastating. Kupchak dropped like a sack of potatoes. He could not breathe. He could not speak. The showboat was silenced. The trash talk died in his throat. He gasped for air on the floor. The entire team stared in shock. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was deafening. And then came the most legendary part. Kareem looked down at Kupchak, gasping on the floor. He did not offer a hand. He did not apologize. He turned around, walked to the sideline, picked up his gym bag, and walked out the door. He got in his car. He drove home. Practice was over. He had disciplined the child. He would see them tomorrow. He left the entire Lakers organization standing in the gym. Pat Riley, Magic Johnson, Jerry West. All of them staring at the body on the floor. Kareem's message was absolute. This is what happens when you cross me. This is what happens when you bring racism into my workspace. I will not debate you. I will not argue with you. I will end you and walk away. The locker room was chaos. Pat Riley was furious. Players whispered that Kupchak had gone too far. Magic Johnson and the younger players were stunned. They had just watched their captain crush a teammate's throat and walk away like nothing happened. The team was divided. Some thought Kareem had overreacted. Others thought Kupchak deserved it. But everyone agreed on one thing. The captain was not to be tested. This was not the Showtime they knew. This was something darker, something terrifying. The rookie Byron Scott would later tell this story with a mix of horror and awe. He learned that day that the captain was not to be messed with. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was exhausted, not physically, emotionally. He had spent his entire life fighting racism. Fans called him slurs. The media mocked his religion. White players resented his intelligence. He had been called names his entire career. He had endured fans yelling hatred from the stands. He had watched the civil rights leaders he admired get assassinated. He carried the historical trauma of the Black American experience. He was tired of writing letters, tired of giving interviews, tired of explaining his humanity. The elbow was a non-verbal statement. It was an assertion that his dignity was not up for negotiation. The racist element was crucial. If Kupchak had simply fouled him hard, Kareem might have fouled him back. But racial disrespect required a different response. By striking the throat, Kareem symbolically and literally removed Kupchak's ability to speak. The next practice was uncertain. Nobody knew if Kareem would show up. Nobody knew if Kupchak would be able to practice. There was tension in the air. Then Kareem arrived, calm, collected. He dominated practice with skyhooks. He did not acknowledge Kupchak. He led by example, not revenge. His message was clear. I am still the captain. I am still in charge. Nothing has changed except now you know what happens when you cross the line. Kupchak missed a week of practice recovering from the tracheal trauma. When he returned, he was different, quieter, respectful. He had been corrected. He tried to talk trash again, but nobody backed him up. The veterans iced him out. Eventually, Kupchak apologized privately. His behavior improved drastically afterward. This is documented fact. The humbling was complete. The Showboat had been silenced permanently. The younger players learned the lesson too. The frat house atmosphere could not bleed onto the court if it meant disrespecting the patriarch. Before the fight, the team felt like a democracy. After the fight, it was a monarchy. Kareem was king. Pat Riley used the moment to unify the team. Magic sided with Kareem. The locker room hierarchy shifted permanently. This moment shaped the dynasty's culture for years to come. The incident destroyed the myth of the white enforcer. For years, players like Kupchak and Kurt Rambis were allowed to brutalize black stars under the guise of competitiveness. By incapacitating Kupchak, Kareem exposed the fragility of this archetype. He showed that the enforcer only exists because the star allows him to exist. When the star revokes that permission, the enforcer is helpless. Kareem had two signature moves. The skyhook was elegant, high release point, body shielding the ball, eyes focused on the rim, a shot designed to avoid contact. It soared over defenders. It was pacifist domination. It said, I am so much better than you, I don't need to touch you. The throat elbow was the opposite. Low center of gravity, torque from the hips, impact point at the closest range, maximum contact. A strike designed to end conflict. It went through the defender. It was martial domination. It said, I am so much stronger than you, I can break you. The tragedy of Kupchak is that he forced Kareem to switch from the skyhook to the elbow. He mistook pacifism for weakness and unlocked the violence of the martial artist. The evolution of Kareem's violence is revealing. In 1977 against Kent Benson, he threw an emotional punch that broke both their bones. The provocation was physical, the response was emotional rage. In 1983 against Kupchak, he threw a disciplined strike that hurt only his opponent. The provocation was sociological, racist, and performative. The response was disciplined punishment. By the late 80s, he rarely needed physical violence. Just the glare was enough. The provocation was general physical play. The response was psychological intimidation. Players knew what he was capable of. He had mastered the enforcer economy. Maximum damage with minimum risk. This is the ultimate victory of the martial artist. Decades later, Mitch Kupchak became the Lakers' general manager. The irony is rich. The Showboat became the executive. In 2014, Kobe Bryant exploded at him during practice. Kobe screamed that his teammates weren't doing anything for him. He called the team soft as charmin. Kupchak stood there and took the abuse. Why? Because he had learned the lesson of the elbow 30 years earlier. You do not fight the alpha. You let the storm pass. You survive. The incident was also a precursor to modern player empowerment. Kareem left practice without permission and faced no consequences. The organization needed him more than they needed order. They needed the skyhook more than they needed Kupchak's pride. Why was this story buried? The answer lies in marketing. In the 1980s, the NBA was desperate to shed its image as too black and too drug-infested. The Lakers were the vehicle for rebranding. Magic Johnson's smile was the logo. The Showtime aesthetic was glamour, offensive fluidity, and interracial harmony. They were the team that saved the NBA from the doldrums of the tape-delayed 70s. A story about the black Muslim captain crushing the throat of a white teammate over a racist slur would have been catastrophic. It would have terrified suburban ticket buyers. It would have brought the ugly reality of American race relations onto center court. So the story was buried. The Lakers buried the incident to protect the brand. It became lore instead of news. But truth surfaces. Through oral histories from players like Byron Scott, the story endured. It endures because it feels true. It feels like the hidden spine of the Showtime era, the steel that held the glitter together. This is the best Kareem Abdul-Jabbar story ever told because it satisfies every requirement of a great American myth. It has a villain who embodies arrogance and bigotry. It has a hero who embodies dignity, skill, and justice. It has a climax that is violent, decisive, and cathartic. And it has a resolution cooler than any screenwriter could invent. The walk-off, the silence, the message sent without words. This is not just a basketball story. It is a story about the boundaries of respect. It is a reminder that behind the smile of Showtime, behind the high fives and fast breaks, stood a giant who was watching, judging, and waiting. When the line was crossed, the giant did not hesitate. The fracture in Mitch Kupchak's throat healed, but the fracture in the illusion of white supremacy on the basketball court was permanent. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar declared that the days of being called boy were over. The era of the man had arrived, and he was not asking permission to leave practice. He was telling them. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was not just the captain of the team, he was the conscience of the league. And as Mitch Kupchak learned in 1983, the conscience has heavy elbows. What's your take on this legendary story? Let us know in the comments.